From Prince to King: The Life of King Edward VII and His Royal Wedding. Imagine being born into the most powerful royal family in the world while your future has already been decided before you can even speak. Imagine knowing that one day you will wear the British crown, yet waiting almost 60 years before that dream becomes reality. This is the incredible story of King Edward VII, a prince whose life was filled with duty, sacrifice, disappointment, and finally glory. Edward was born on the 9th of November 1841 inside Buckingham Palace as the first son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The moment news of his birth spread across Britain, church bells rang, crowds celebrated, and newspapers announced that the future of the British monarchy had arrived. Millions believed the young prince would one day become one of the greatest kings in history. From his earliest years, Edward lived a life very different from ordinary children. Every hour of his day was carefully planned. Tutors surrounded him from morning until night. He studied history, geography, mathematics, languages, religion, military discipline, and the traditions of the British crown. There was very little time for games or freedom because everyone expected perfection from the future king. Prince Albert believed that a ruler must earn respect through knowledge, discipline, and hard work. He personally supervised much of Edward's education and expected him to become the perfect monarch, but Edward was different. He loved horse riding, traveling, meeting new people, music, hunting, and exploring the world outside palace walls. Sitting for long hours with books was never easy for him, and this often disappointed his father. Queen Victoria loved her eldest son, but she also expected him to carry the honor of the royal family. Every mistake, every forgotten lesson, and every careless decision brought criticism. Edward slowly began to feel that no matter how hard he tried, he could never truly satisfy his parents. The pressure of becoming the future king weighed heavily on his young shoulders. As Edward grew older, he realized that wearing the title of Prince of Wales was not only a privilege but also a burden. Every public appearance was watched, every newspaper reported his actions, every member of the government expected him to behave perfectly. The entire nation seemed to be waiting for the day he would become king. But fate had written a very different story. No one could imagine that the young prince standing proudly beside his parents would one day become the longest-waiting heir in British history. A single tragedy was about to change his life forever and create a distance between mother and son that would last for decades. Prince Albert had always believed that discipline would prepare Edward for the greatest responsibility of his life. He wanted his son to become a wise ruler respected by every nation in the world. But before Edward could prove himself, tragedy entered the royal family. In the year 1861, Prince Albert became seriously ill. Despite every effort to save him, he passed away, leaving Queen Victoria completely heartbroken. The death of Prince Albert changed everything inside Buckingham Palace. The palace that had once been filled with music, laughter, and royal celebrations suddenly became silent. Queen Victoria locked herself away from the public and dressed in black for the rest of her life. She rarely smiled and spent every day mourning the husband she had loved so deeply. For Edward, this was the most painful moment of his life. He had lost not only his father but also the man who had guided every step of his childhood. Instead of receiving comfort, Edward faced something even more difficult. Queen Victoria believed that the stress caused by Edward's behavior had added to Prince Albert's final illness. Whether that belief was true or not, it created a wall between mother and son that neither of them could easily break. Edward remained the Prince of Wales, but his mother refused to give him important royal responsibilities. Year after year, he watched as Queen Victoria continued to rule the British Empire while he stood in the background waiting patiently for an opportunity that never seemed to arrive. Many people across Britain began asking the same question: would Edward ever become king? Rather than giving up, Edward decided to prepare himself in another way. He traveled across Europe, visited different countries, met kings, queens, presidents, and diplomats, and learned how great nations were governed. His friendly personality, confidence, and ability to speak with people from every background quickly earned him respect. Wherever he traveled, crowds gathered to welcome the handsome Prince of Wales, and newspapers followed every step of his journey. Little did the world know that another unforgettable chapter of Edward's life was about to begin. A meeting with a beautiful Danish princess would soon capture his heart and lead to one of the most celebrated royal weddings in British history. Edward first met Princess Alexandra of Denmark during his travels across Europe. The moment they met, they felt comfortable in each other's company. Alexandra was admired for her kindness, grace, and gentle personality, while Edward was known for his warmth, confidence, and charm. Their friendship quickly grew stronger, and before long they realized they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. When news of their engagement reached Britain, the people celebrated with great excitement. Newspapers praised the future royal couple, and many believed Alexandra would bring new happiness to the royal family. After the long years of sadness following Prince Albert's death, the nation was ready for a joyful occasion. Once every Preparation had been completed. Thousands of guests gathered at St. George's Chapel inside Windsor Castle to witness one of the grandest royal weddings in British history. On the wedding day, the streets were filled with cheering crowds, flags decorated towns and cities, church bells rang across the country, and people waited for hours just to catch a glimpse of the bride and groom. Alexandra wore a magnificent white wedding gown while Edward proudly stood beside her wearing his royal military uniform as they exchanged their marriage vows. Millions of people across Britain celebrated the beginning of a new chapter for the future king and queen. After their marriage, Edward and Alexandra became one of the most admired royal couples in Europe. They traveled together, attended royal ceremonies, welcomed important guests, and represented Britain with dignity wherever they appeared. Huge crowds gathered to see them. Alexandra won the hearts of the British people through her kindness, generosity, and elegant style, while Edward continued to strengthen his friendships with rulers across Europe. Although Edward enjoyed a happy family life, one challenge still remained. The British crown was still beyond his reach. Queen Victoria continued to reign, and year after year Edward remained the Prince of Wales, waiting patiently for the day when destiny would finally call his name. Little did he know that the moment he had waited for almost his entire life was now drawing closer than ever before. Years passed and the British Empire continued to grow under Queen Victoria, yet Edward remained the Prince of Wales, waiting longer than anyone had ever expected. He attended official ceremonies, welcomed foreign rulers, opened hospitals, schools, and public buildings, and represented the crown whenever his mother could not attend. Even though he carried out many royal duties, he still had no real authority to govern the nation. Many people began wondering whether Edward would ever sit upon the throne. Some critics believed he cared too much about social life, while others admired his ability to connect with ordinary people and world leaders alike. Behind the smiles and public appearances, Edward continued preparing himself for the responsibility he knew would one day arrive. He studied politics, listened carefully to experienced ministers, and learned valuable lessons from every journey he made across Europe. Then in the year 1901, the moment that had seemed so distant finally arrived. Queen Victoria passed away after ruling Britain for more than 60 years. The entire nation entered a period of mourning. Flags were lowered, church bells rang, and millions of people paid tribute to the woman who had shaped an entire generation. For Edward, this was a moment filled with both sorrow and responsibility. He had lost his mother, but he had also become the new king of the United Kingdom. After nearly 60 years of waiting, the Prince of Wales was finally crowned as King Edward VII. At the age of 59, he became one of the oldest people ever to inherit the British throne, proving that patience and determination had finally been rewarded. As the nation looked toward its new king, many people wondered whether Edward would simply continue the past or lead Britain into a completely new era. No one could imagine how quickly he would change the image of the monarchy and earn the respect of people across the world. After becoming King Edward VII, the eyes of the entire world turned toward Britain. Many people had doubted him because he had waited almost 60 years for the throne, yet within a short time he proved that experience, wisdom, and patience could create a remarkable ruler. He believed that a king should be close to his people and should represent Britain with confidence, dignity, and respect. One of the greatest moments of his reign was his magnificent coronation. Thousands of guests from different countries arrived in London. Royal families, diplomats, military leaders, and important visitors gathered to witness the beginning of a new chapter in British history. The streets were decorated with flags, flowers, and royal banners, while enormous crowds filled every corner hoping to see their new king. As Edward wore the imperial crown, the ceremony marked the beginning of what would soon be known as the Edwardian Age. King Edward traveled across Europe, meeting kings, queens, and presidents. Wherever he went, his friendly personality and natural ability to build trust helped strengthen Britain's relationships with many nations. Because of his efforts, people began calling him the Peacemaker King. He believed that strong friendships between countries could help protect peace and reduce conflict across Europe. His influence reached far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace, and many foreign rulers respected his advice and leadership. Back home, the British people enjoyed a new atmosphere. The royal family became more visible than it had been for many years. Public celebrations, royal ceremonies, and official visits returned, bringing excitement throughout the country. Edward showed that the monarchy could remain traditional while also connecting with ordinary people in a modern world. His reign inspired confidence and gave Britain a renewed sense of pride. But as the years passed, the king's health slowly began to weaken. Even though he continued performing his royal duties, his body was becoming tired. The people who had waited so long to see him become king now feared that his time on the throne might be much shorter than anyone had hoped. As the Edwardian Age continued, Britain entered a period of confidence, elegance, and progress. New buildings appeared in growing cities, technology continued to improve, and the British Empire remained one of the most powerful nations in the world. King Edward VII encouraged stronger relationships with other countries, believing that respect and understanding could achieve what conflict often could not. His visits to foreign nations earned admiration, and many leaders welcomed him not only as a king but also as a trusted friend. Wherever Edward traveled, thousands of people gathered to greet him. Crowds waved British flags, musicians filled the streets with celebration, and newspapers reported every detail of his royal visits. His warm smile, confident manner, and ability to speak with people from every background made him one of the most popular monarchs of his time. Unlike many rulers who stayed behind palace walls, Edward believed that a king should be seen by his people and should understand the world beyond the royal court. Princess Alexandra remained by his side throughout these important years. She supported the king during official ceremonies, welcomed visiting royal families, and devoted herself to charity, hospitals, and the welfare of ordinary people. Together they represented a modern royal family admired across Britain and Europe. Their partnership strengthened the image of the monarchy and inspired loyalty among millions of people. As time passed, the king's health slowly became weaker. Years of hard work, constant travel, and official duties began to take their toll. Even though doctors advised him to rest, Edward continued serving his country because he believed that duty always came before comfort. The people of Britain could see that their king was growing older, yet they continued to respect him for his determination, courage, and devotion. No one realized that the remarkable journey of the prince, who had waited almost 60 years for the crown, was now approaching its final chapter. A moment was coming that would bring sadness to Britain and mark the end of the Edwardian era, but the legacy of King Edward VII would continue to live on for generations. The final years of King Edward VII were filled with both honor and sacrifice. Even as his health continued to decline, he remained committed to serving his country. He continued meeting government leaders, welcoming foreign guests, and carrying out royal duties whenever his strength allowed. The people of Britain admired their king because they could see that he placed duty above his own comfort and never stopped working for the nation he loved. In the year 1910, King Edward VII passed away, leaving the entire country in deep mourning. Church bells rang across Britain, flags were lowered, and thousands of people gathered along the streets to pay their final respects. Newspapers around the world described him as a king who had brought new life to the British monarchy and strengthened friendships between nations. His funeral was attended by kings, queens, princes, and world leaders, making it one of the largest gatherings of royalty the world had ever seen. After his passing, his son George became King George V and continued the work of the royal family, but the memory of Edward VII never faded. Historians remembered him as the prince who waited longer than any other heir before finally wearing the crown. They remembered his kindness, his confidence, his diplomacy, and his determination to serve Britain with honor. The story of King Edward VII reminds us that success does not always come quickly. Sometimes the greatest victories belong to those who refuse to lose hope. Even after years of waiting, from the halls of Buckingham Palace to the throne of the British Empire, his journey proved that patience, courage, and dedication can shape history and inspire generations. His name will always remain a symbol of perseverance, leadership, and royal duty, and his remarkable journey from prince to king will continue to be remembered for centuries to come.